Today, breaking news: the war in Eastern Europe is entering a far more dangerous and unpredictable phase as Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus become locked in a hidden alliance dynamic that could ignite a much bigger conflict. What once appeared to be a regional war has now evolved into a complex geopolitical confrontation with consequences that stretch far beyond the borders of Ukraine. The involvement of Belarus, long operating in the shadows, is no longer subtle, and the signals coming from Moscow, Kiev, and Minsk suggest that the next chapter could be the most explosive yet. For many months, Belarus was described as a silent partner, a quiet supporter, or simply a staging ground. But silence does not mean neutrality. Behind closed doors, Belarus has played a critical role in shaping Russia's military options and strategic calculations. From the earliest days of the invasion, Belarusian territory was used to launch troops, missiles, and aircraft into northern Ukraine. This alone tied Belarus to the conflict in a way that cannot be undone. The world initially believed that Belarus would avoid direct involvement, fearing internal unrest and international sanctions. However, the deeper the war drags on, the more Belarus becomes intertwined with Russia's survival strategy. Moscow sees Minsk not just as an ally, but as a strategic extension of its western military front. This relationship is built on decades of political dependency, security agreements, and economic pressure. Russia's military setbacks and slow advances in Ukraine have forced the Kremlin to look for new leverage points. One of the most obvious is Belarus. With a long border shared with Ukraine, Belarus provides Russia with a northern pressure point that Kiev cannot afford to ignore. Even the possibility of Belarusian forces entering the war forces Ukraine to divert troops and resources away from critical eastern and southern fronts. Ukraine understands this danger clearly. Ukrainian military planners know that a new front opening from the north could stretch defenses to a breaking point. This is why Kiev closely monitors every troop movement, exercise, and announcement coming out of Belarus. Even routine drills are now treated as potential warning signs of escalation. Belarusian leadership, meanwhile, walks a careful and calculated line. Publicly, officials claim that Belarus is not directly fighting in Ukraine. Privately, the country's infrastructure, airspace, and logistics are deeply integrated into Russia's war machine. This dual posture allows Belarus to maintain plausible deniability while still delivering real strategic value to Moscow. The hidden alliance between Russia and Belarus is not just military, it is political and economic as well. Sanctions imposed on Russia have pushed it closer to Belarus, making Minsk even more dependent on Moscow for energy, trade, and financial stability. This dependency limits Belarus's freedom of choice and increases the likelihood that it will follow Russia into deeper conflict if ordered to do so. At the same time, Belarus faces internal pressures that complicate its role. Large segments of the population oppose involvement in the war. Past protests have shown that public anger can erupt quickly. This creates a dangerous tension between the demands of Moscow and the risks of domestic instability. Belarus's leadership must balance loyalty to Russia with fear of unrest at home. From Russia's perspective, Belarus is a strategic asset that cannot be wasted. If Moscow decides that escalation is necessary to break Ukrainian resistance, Belarus becomes the most logical option. A credible threat from the north forces Ukraine to defend Kiev once again, even if no immediate attack comes. Fear itself becomes a weapon. Ukraine, on the other hand, uses this threat to strengthen international support. By highlighting the risk of Belarus joining the war, Kiev underscores that this conflict is expanding, not shrinking. This messaging is aimed at NATO and European allies, warning that instability could spread closer to their borders if decisive action is not taken. NATO's response to Belarus's role has been cautious but firm. Alliance leaders have repeatedly stated that any direct involvement by Belarus would have serious consequences. Military deployments in Eastern Europe have been adjusted to deter further escalation. Intelligence monitoring of Belarus has intensified, signaling that the alliance is preparing for worst-case scenarios. Despite these warnings, the risk remains real. Wars often escalate not because leaders plan them carefully, but because pressure, fear, and miscalculation collide. A single incident along the Belarus-Ukraine border could spiral into something far larger. A missile misfire, an accidental clash, or a sudden order could change everything overnight. Russia's long-term strategy appears to rely on exhausting Ukraine and its supporters. By keeping multiple fronts active or threatening to open new ones, Moscow aims to stretch Ukrainian defenses thin. Belarus fits perfectly into this strategy as a constant reminder that the war's geography is still flexible. Ukraine's counter-strategy focuses on resilience and deterrence. By fortifying northern defenses and maintaining rapid response units, Kiev hopes to neutralize the Belarus factor before it becomes active. At the same time, Ukraine continues to strike Russian supply lines and command centers to reduce Moscow's capacity for escalation. The hidden alliance also has a psychological dimension. For Ukrainian civilians, the thought of another invasion route reopening is deeply unsettling. Memories of the early days of the war, when Russian forces advanced from the north, are still fresh. This fear is part of the battlefield, shaping morale and public perception. Internationally, Belarus's involvement challenges the narrative of a contained conflict. It raises questions about how many more actors could be drawn in if the war continues unchecked. If Belarus crosses the line, other states may feel compelled to reassess their own positions, increasing the risk of a wider war. Economic consequences would follow quickly. New sanctions on Belarus would deepen its isolation and further bind it to Russia. Supply chains in Eastern Europe would face new disruptions. Energy markets, already volatile, could react sharply to signs of escalation, affecting prices worldwide. Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation face serious obstacles. Trust between Russia and Ukraine is virtually non-existent. Belarus is viewed with suspicion by Kiev and the West. Any negotiation framework that includes Minsk is likely to be fragile and limited in scope, yet diplomacy remains the only path to preventing a larger war. Military solutions alone cannot address the underlying political tensions that drive this conflict. The challenge is finding a way to engage Belarus without rewarding aggression or legitimizing hidden involvement. As time passes, the lines between direct and indirect participation blur. Belarus may not officially declare war, but its actions increasingly shape the conflict's outcome. This ambiguity is dangerous because it allows escalation to occur without clear accountability. The coming months will be critical. Military movements in Belarus, changes in rhetoric from Minsk, and shifts in Russian strategy will all provide clues about what comes next. Ukraine and its allies must remain vigilant, prepared for both sudden escalation and prolonged pressure. The hidden alliance between Russia and Belarus is not a static arrangement. It evolves with the war's momentum. As Russia faces challenges on the battlefield, its reliance on Belarus is likely to grow. This increases the risk that Minsk will be pulled further into the conflict, willingly or not. For Ukraine, the priority remains survival and sovereignty. Preventing a wider war means deterring Belarus while continuing to resist Russian aggression. This balancing act requires constant adaptation, strong international backing, and unwavering resolve. For the world, the message is clear. The war in Ukraine is not frozen. It is dynamic, volatile, and capable of expanding. Belarus stands at the center of this uncertainty, a quiet partner with the potential to ignite a much bigger war. Every move now carries enormous weight. Decisions made in Moscow, Kiev, and Minsk will shape not only the future of Ukraine, but the security of Europe as a whole. The hidden alliance is no longer hidden. It is a warning sign that the conflict has not reached its peak, and that the most dangerous moments may still lie ahead.